is the frightened child at the end there, and that you encompass it. And by encompassing it, well, you become more human.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot to think about with that. Um, I mentioned that you have a band
Mm-hmm.
and that you like to perform and that music is central to your work. And I'm hoping that you can treat us to, let's say, a poem with your flute,
Okay. Let's see, which one will I do?
Emergence.
I'll do Emergence, and I'll play a little bit for that. This poem was written. We all have time. There's moments. There's pivotal moments. We're always making choices in our lives. When we get up in the morning, am I going to get up or not, or am I going to get up on the wrong side of the bed, or whatever? But this one, I wound up in L.A., and I always said, "Oh, I'll never live in L.A. It's going to fall into the ocean." And I figured now, if it does, it will be bad movies that finally are the final trigger, not earthquakes. But so then I wound up living in a little place momentarily right off Hollywood Boulevard, whole different world. And this was about that. It was a summer night and listening. I was listening to the immigrants who were living around in the apartment building who had also said, I will never move to LA. And never is a very powerful word. It's one of the most powerful words in the world because you will most certainly do what you say you will never do because it's magnetic, I think. Intensity is
Right.
magnetic. So if you say, I won't do something and you say it with an intensity, the intensity doesn't hear not, it just hears the
Go for
image.
it.
Yeah. At least that's my theory of how it works now. So here we are in LA, downtown in the summer, and you hear the Spice Girls going up the Hollywood Boulevard in a double-decker bus, and then there's somebody lonely in the somebody in one of the little rooms thinking about home and watching the sun go down. It's midsummer night. The light is skinny. A thin skirt of desire skims the earth. Dogs bark at the musk of other dogs and the urge to go wild. I'm lingering at the edge of a broken heart, striking relentlessly against the flint of hard will. It's coming apart. Everyone knows it. So do squash erupting in flowers the color of the sun. So does the momentum of grace gathering allies in the partying mob. The heart knows everything. I remember when there was no urge to cut the earth or each other into pieces when we knew how to think in beautiful. There is no world like the one surfacing. I can smell it as I pace in my square room. The neighbor's television entering my house by waves of sound makes me think about buying a new car, another kind of cigarette when I don't need a new car and I don't even smoke cigarettes. A human mind is small when thinking of small things. It is large when embracing the maker of walking, thinking, and flying. If I can locate the sense beyond desire, I will not eat or drink until I stagger into the earth with grief. I will locate the point of dawning and awaken with the longest day in the world.
I'm thinking how community, the company of like minded people in a way, has so often saved you from that feeling of isolation, say, in a foreign culture. And because we were talking beforehand about outrigger canoes
Mm-hmm.
and your love of being strong
Mm-hmm.
and paddling,
Mm-hmm.
if you could talk a little about what you feel when you're out there in the water in a community of paddlers, I guess.
Yeah, I'm the kind of person, that's a good question, because I'm a paradox of sorts, and my poems are marked by paradox, where I'm very rooted in my Muskogee culture. That's the heart and soul, it's there. Yet, I find my home in cultures all over the world. I find my place. I don't feel comfortable. I've never felt like I've had an absolute home here on this earth, and yet
Mm,
this earth so much informs home. I mean, I can find home taking a little walk by the conservancy. I can find home in the flight of a dragonfly, or in my dream world is really where I find my home. And yet in other I find home in the ocean. I am an outrigger canoe paddler. I find a lot of connections between Hawaiian paddlers and riders and myself. But I've also found connections with Stanley
mm,
Kunitz up
yeah.
here, and with other people from all over. In poems, I can find my home in a poem, or in meeting somebody in the airport and sitting and visiting with somebody who's taking care of a baby. It's the home. I think that's what I've had to learn, and is is that my home, it's in here.
Mm.
It's in here, and it's the root is in with my tribe, with the language. And even as much as I've run away from everybody, I always come back.
I'm remembering something Stanley Kunitz said, which is that poems have to come from like under the water, and it's like you pull them up with all the muck and the goo of the brambles and all that that's underwater. And if it's skimming the surface, it's less satisfying. I kind of have, I never thought of that before, but
Hmm.
it's kind of like you're pulling something up or out. Um, that's that's given voice to. So I find that really interesting. I wonder if you could read perhaps one of your prose poems that has to do with that sense of home. Um, what was the one about the Red Mountains? The first.
Let's see. My house is the red earth.
Yeah.
Okay. This piece it is little, they're little poetic prose pieces, I call them, that I wrote for a book that is a collaboration with a photographer,
Mm,
Stephen Strom.
mm.
And I'm about to do my own book of photographs with prose. I've been photographing, and I'm working on that also. But this one is to give back. The piece is actually to give back and to say thank you to this land that gives us so much but asks for very little from
Mm.
humans. So I'll just read a few parts of that. My house is the red earth. It could be the center of the world. I've heard New York, Paris, Tokyo called the center of the world. But I say it's magnificently humble. You could drive by and miss it. Radio waves can obscure it, words cannot construct it, for there are some sounds left to sacred, wordless form. For instance, that fool crow, picking through trash near the corral, understands the center of the world as greasy scraps of fat. Just ask him. He doesn't have to say that the earth has turned scarlet through fierce belief. After centuries of heartbreak and laughter, he perches on the blue bowl of the sky and laughs.
We love that crow
Yeah,
as a contrast.
they're always
Uh,
doing studies on human behavior. That's what they're doing.
true.
Yeah, they're involved in studies. They're reporting back
Too.
to the creator of all of us.
Now you have a poem which mentions the breath maker.
Hmm.
Who is the creator
Well, in
of?
the Muskogee, there's actually a word that we don't say out loud much, but is the
Mm,
creator of all, and it's the same of all. We all go back to the same place. Breath maker is Hasagara Masi, and when the Christians came, they linked on. It's and that he's he, she. It's not a he. There's no, that being is the one who is in charge of breath, which is so important to humans and to our our existence. When we take our first breath, it's a promise. It's a promise to take it on. Say we're going to take on it. We're going to take on our part of the story.
In the Hebrew language, this is really interesting. The same word is soul and breath. Kind of a wind that comes in. And also the name Abel and Cain and Abel means wet breath.
Wow.
Of course, he gets knocked off pretty soon.
Yeah.
Anyway, he was the one who knew what kind of gift to give to the Creator. And that's something I'd like to come back to too, which is a sense of the sacred, of reverence. But on something you write later on, you talk about Saint Coincidence. How does that fit in?
That just came about. You never know. That poem is very much a story that's kind of based on the Seneca creation story, the woman who fell from the sky. And so I wind up with this story, and I don't even know what set it off, of a woman falling from the sky and landing in the Safeway.
Good place.
And Saint Coincidence was part of that whole, it was part of the winding around.
Well, that's the other thing, food. It's almost like food brings us back to the things of this world. I mean, that you are someplace sacred or holy, and then you walk to the refrigerator or you have a cup of coffee, and that kind of is a transition into the everyday world. I'm wondering if in your real life, whatever is real, that the border, how does that work in everyday life? The border between that other world, the deeper world, the more human world, and our everyday world. How does that? You travel back and forth many times a day.
I do, and I think I always go back to being a child, because when I was a child, I could see and move between the worlds in a much more fluid manner. And I marked the day that I went to school and was taught not to know those things was a big shift, was a huge shift. And I have spent, poetry for me was a way of honoring and getting back to that kind of movement and travel between what is called dreams, which may be our real world. If you think about it, when we're all going to die eventually, everyone, and what are we're going to be in that dream world. That's the more real. That's, if you think about it, that's
absolutely, it's
there it
the
is.
Center of your universe. And actually, this is a good place to come to a close, because you mentioned childhood, and that's something you knew in childhood. It's like an up we forgot as up we grew, or something like that, that there's some kind of relationship that is certain and known and intuitive at that point, and that we kind of need to come back to. And do we have time for another brief flute song? We'd love to hear that.
Okay. I'm going to sing a morning song in Creek, and then let's see. Hadhayaga igana mahalajas, agalachka iragalet, hadhayaga dilajet achamgas. Hetlusatmo era hojet, obafunga lafan wijalisa chamgaros, chapin godly goes. The red dawn now is rearranging the earth. Thought by thought, beauty by beauty, each sunrise a link on the ladder. Thought by thought, beauty by beauty, the ladder, the backbone of shimmering deity. Thought by thought, beauty by beauty, child stirring in the web of your mother. Don't be afraid. Old man turning to walk through the door. Don't be afraid. Now the flute's in a different key, but I can
go for it. Lovely. I've been here today with Joy Harjo, who has many projects for the
Hmm.
future. She is going to be writing her memoir, or maybe you're deep in process,
Hmm.
and children's story,
Hmm.
and giving a huge performance in what city in
In
California? In
LA, it's a
LA.
one-woman show, and then I've got a new CD of music with some of the songs from that show.
Right.
Uh-huh.
So we're privileged to have Joy here today, and privileged to learn some ways, some paths we can follow to become more human. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much.
Chakwani wadukliba mesi. Chakwani wadukliba mesi. Kanwe tum tum hoy alta. Oilo, oilo,
Hi, everyone. This is Colleen Echohawk. I am here in Pioneer Square at a Chi Seattle Club office and delighted to get to spend some time with you today to discuss some amazing work by Joy Harjo. This is one of my most favorite poets and is also the U.S. Poet Laureate. And we are excited to have her virtually and live at the Chi Seattle Club event next week, next Wednesday. But in preparation for that, we're going to have a wonderful conversation today with some great friends. And we are just so glad that you're with us. So, tell your friends and your neighbors and your family that is probably sitting next to you that this event is happening because we want as many people to hear about this amazing work of Joy Harjo. I'm also just want to say that we are delighted to be on Coast Salish territory here in Seattle. I want to take a moment to recognize how much we benefit from their land and water, specifically the Suquamish, Muckleshoot, and Duwamish tribes, who they have been here since time immemorial, and we acknowledge them. We are grateful to be on their land. So you might be coming in from all over the country or maybe all over the globe. I'd like to invite you to take a moment to think about where you're at. Whose land and water are you benefiting from and resources? And it's important for us to acknowledge that. It's important for us to acknowledge that we are in a conversation today about Native people, about Native community, about our understandings of home. We do this because we know that around the globe, and especially here in Seattle and around in our country, that we have some of the highest rates of homelessness, and it's particularly disturbing to me that we live in indigenous land and territories, yet we have the highest rates of homelessness. So I'd like to invite you to think about that as well. Like, what do we do? How do we respond to these kind of crises? We know that we're in unprecedented times, right? Like, how many times can we say that? But yet it is true. This is a very strange time. And having these conversations, being thoughtful about where we're at right now and what we are doing is vastly important. The way that we recover from this crisis is it's incredibly important. And I believe that leadership from the Native community is going to be a huge part of ensuring that we recover in a way that responds to the needs of the entire community. So we want to thank you so much for being here. I want to welcome you to this event and know that we're going to have a really great hour. I just want to say thanks to Olivia and Jeff who are behind the scenes making sure this all runs correctly. So thank you so much. And with that, I want to introduce Misha Stone from Seattle Public Library, who's going to help guide us through this time together.
Hi, thank you so much, Colleen. I am honored to be here today to join in celebration of Joy Harjo, our U.S. Poet Laureate's work in American Sunrise. And I want to introduce our special co-host. Gyasi Ross, Blackfeet, is an author, speaker, and storyteller. He is regularly asked to speak on race, social justice, and white privilege, as well as issues specifically affecting contemporary Native Americans. And he guests on MSNBC, Democracy Now!, and radio shows nationwide. Gyasi writes for Huffington Post, Indian Country Today, Deadspin, and Gawker. His spoken word hip-hop CD, Acoustic, Before Here Was Here, is on Cabin Game Records. And I also want to introduce Colleen, who's here today, Pawnee Athabascan, who's the executive director of Chief Seattle Club, a human service provider for urban natives, many of whom are experiencing homelessness, and the founder of the Coalition to End Homelessness. Recognizing a lack of equity in housing and development, Colleen is focused on equitable, low-income housing and Indigenous-led design solutions. Colleen is the mayoral appointment to the Community Police Commission, recipient of King County's 2020 Martin Luther King Medal of Distinguished Service, and named one of 2019 Seattle's most influential people by Seattle Magazine. Thank you both for joining in this discussion for Seattle, Chief Seattle Club's Joy Harjo Book Club.
Thank you for having us.
Super great to be here.
And hi, Colleen. Hi, sis.
Gyasi and I have known each other for so long. I don't know how many years.
22.
Years?
22.
All right. Well, I'm so glad to see you. Your hair is looking pretty awesome in this. I see a COVID hair, thick hair Gyasi right now.
It's nice to see you. It's weird that it has to be online, but yeah, it's nice to see you.
Well, it's the new world we're living in. So glad to be here. So glad to hear, Gyasi. Thank you so much for taking the time. I know you just run out of court and you're just super busy, and grateful for your ongoing support of the Chief Seattle Club. And the final thing I'll say is that, Gyasi, you not only are you an incredible advocate in the community, but you also are a servant leader. And I've seen you at the Chief Seattle Club just washing dishes and supporting our relatives out there who've been experiencing homelessness. So just really appreciate your leadership and the way that you show up in this world. It's really powerful.
Thank you. It's always, it's anything for Chief Seattle Club, anything for Colleen, anything for the Echohawks. I mean, there's a certain hierarchy, and it's always an honor. So it's just good to see you.
Hey, it's about servant leadership, about serving our community, giving all we can to our relatives out there. And I know that's why we've just been a united front for a long time, Gyasi. So glad to see you. And sorry, Misha, we had to do a little catch up.
Yeah. Hi, Misha.
Hi. No, that's the part. That's the part of the beauty, because this is an opportunity for us to come together and celebrate the amazing work that Chief Seattle Club is doing in our community, and how Joy Harjo's poetry creates a house of the spirit, like was mentioned before in the talk that was just streamed before we met. So today we're going to only really talk about 3 poems, even though every poem we could take an hour with each poem, because they're all so rich and so amazing. And we're going to touch on how her work explores themes that matter deeply to Chief Seattle Club and our community, what it means for a Native person to have a home, and finding peace in these tumultuous times. So I don't know how well this was going to work, but I was hoping that we could maybe read at least one of the poems out loud together. So potentially advice for countries. It's a call and response poem. And I thought maybe just reading that one could also start and center our discussion today. How's that sound?
That sounds really great. And I just want to remind everyone that we're reading from the American Sunrise. This is the newest publication by Joy Harjo. And I keep telling people that this book is so beautiful and so incredibly easy to get. Like, I'm not necessarily, I'm not like Gyasi with like a poetry background. I don't understand. I haven't read a lot of poetry, but I have found this incredibly accessible. And I invite everyone who loves literature to read it. It's beautiful. You're gonna love it.
So shall we try reading a poem and then dive in? All right. So advice for countries. I was hoping, Gyasi, that you would read the unitalicized, and then the three of us may read the italicized together. So we'll see how that flow works. But it'll be a beautiful experiment.
Okay, let's do it. And I'd like to also read the title, because the title is cool. Advice for countries advanced, developing, and falling. A country is a person.
A country is a noun to be bought and sold. I have a deed.
The ruler's disposition and rules determine the state of being for all constituents.
Each state governs itself without respect for individuals. It's everyone for themselves.
Power is dangerous when wielded in the hands of one. It is meant to be shared.
I was given this position by cunning, by money, by sex, by family, by God. It belongs to me and no one else.
We cannot own anyone else, people, the lands, or resources. We are here to care for each other.
We are right. We build walls to keep anyone who is not like us out of here. God gave us these lands. We separate children and cage them because they are breaking our God's law.
Every increment of any thought, action, or deed matters, has consequences in all directions.
Not if you can make a law.
Not if it passes the Supreme Court. Not if you can pay for it.
There will be no balance without all voices present in the power circle.
You will never earn your way here. You are the wrong sex, wrong color of skin, wrong sexual orientation, not my religion, not my language.
There will be no balance without all voices present in the power circle.
We will make this country great again. I think we did okay.
Yeah. So Misha, is it going to be a call and response on the questions as well?
Yeah. So I feel like this is a poem that really, I think, hits at the cognitive dissonance of the story that America tells about itself and the truth that Indigenous people know. So I'm wondering what that poem brings up for you and how it speaks to our present moment.
Colleen, you want to?
Gyasi, you want to go first? I'm having a little trouble with my mic. So I'm gonna
okay, of course. I think that obviously she captures that, as you said, cognitive dissonance very, very well. And it's something that it's interesting. I guess the most profound part of conversations like that and pieces like that for me is the fact that we actually have to explain that, because for us, it's, and I can't speak for all Native people or even any Native people other than myself, but I know for my family, we assume this level of hypocrisy. We assume this level of disruption, and it's not something that, it has to be explained and it has to be spelled out. And so then I think of Sister Joy Harjo as the poet laureate, who her audience is. Her audience is everybody, because she's the U.S. poet laureate. And so her explaining it to people is stuff that we know very well and is almost molecular and genetic for us. And you know, that's the part that's most amazing to me, because that's not a dinner time conversation with most Native people. Most Native people just assume like, yeah, this is, you know, there's this hypocrisy that goes on with the United States.
Absolutely. I think that is a really important thing to think about in terms of what impact her work is having, and that it has to be explained to many people because they have bought into that narrative voice, that dominant voice that is being brought forward in that poem. How did it feel to read it, just thinking about how hard it is to be the lone voice and the voice that has to explain itself?
You guys, I'm just a little worried about my mic. I'm just checking in with Jeff.
There
you
it is.
go.
There it is.
Okay, good.
Whoa. It was
went down
there.
here.
Can you hear me now?
Barely.
Okay. I'm gonna do one more quick change. So if you guys
Okay.
want to continue the conversation,
Yeah, I'll take that question, Misha.
Thanks, Gyasi.
You know, so I went to, I think like a lot of Native kids, when I moved from the reservation when I was a young teenager, I was almost always the only Native kid in the class. Almost always, like every single time. So when anytime a question came up about Native values, Native history, everybody turned to me, and I was the expert default. Of course, I'm not an expert. And I think that isolation, a lot of Native people have that experience. And so that response, that need to explain, so many, look, Native people are brilliant. We have and I'm not saying that like in a mean, rhetorical, you know, affirmation sort of way. I'm talking that like on an honest day-to-day level, we have so much knowledge packed in ourselves because we have to, because we get all these random questions and have to be able to explain and code switch and be able to relate to people that have no interest, no wherewithal, and no way to relate to us. So we have to do all the relating. You know, even these conversations, we're having them in English for a reason. We're not having them in the Lushootseed language. We're not having them in the Blackfeet language. We're not having them in the Pawnee language. So it's constant. We're relating to the dominant culture and not the dominant culture relating to us.
And also so much of what this poem evokes also is just the cognitive dissonance of the things that Americans think that they value, which is sharing and community and listening to elders, that doesn't actually carry through in a lot of the decision-making processes and the laws and so on. And so it's what she also highlights is the indigenous brilliance that has been drowned out by a culture who says that they believe these things and does exactly the opposite. Were there any lines that really struck you as being all the more powerful and having read them out loud?
I'm still struggling with my mic. Can you guys hear anything?
There it is.
Oh, good. All right. Well, thank you, Jeff, for supporting me on this. Well, I just want to go back really quick to something that I wanted to talk about since I knew we were going to talk about this poem. And Gyasi, you hit on it at the very beginning about the title of the poem, Advice for Countries Advanced, Developing, and Falling. And I think that is such an important idea and question for us right now in this space that we're in. You know, let's see, in February, I was in Mentasta Lake Village, where I was there for a potlatch for my niece. And I was there, and one of the elders got up and said, "Hey, I just want to just acknowledge like how many people are in the room." There was like 300 of us in the room. It was beautiful. And she said, "You know, I remember the days when there was only 50 or 60 of us at a potlatch because of the Spanish flu and the epidemic that like wiped us out." And, you know, I have been in the Chief Seattle Club. We have been like at the front lines of responding to this crisis of a pandemic. And I just think what is so beautiful and wonderful is to see the Native community in those ways, Gyasi, show our brilliance, show our resiliency, show what can happen when Native community is leading the way around feeding our people. And I just think that in the, we have a really interesting election coming up, to say the least. But we have some wonderful community members out there leading the way, showing the brilliance of Native community, and I'm just excited for the future, even though it is we don't know what's exactly going to happen, but I'm excited for where we're going to go, and I just wanted to reflect on that when we think about this poem and what Joy is trying to share through this voice.
Misha, can I answer that?
Yeah.
I wanted to, yeah, I mean, Colleen reflects and Colleen's constituents, but it's so easy to focus on Colleen's constituents because oftentimes those are the most vulnerable, without considering that Native people as a matter of data are all vulnerable. It doesn't matter. There's 2 degrees of separation amongst Native people. So the person that's seemingly protected by education or protected by house, protected by medical care, ACA, protected by private insurance, whatever it is, has a very, very small margin for error and is walking a balance beam between being one of those most vulnerable. And that's a way that America has constantly failed us. This poem makes me think of another incredible poet, and I think that Joy is right there, in regards to her prominence. Langston Hughes, "Let America be America Again," where there's that cynical voice in the background because we're supposed to have that. Have you read history? And if we don't have that cynical voice that's telling us that there's the rug that's going to be swept out from us at all times, then we're not paying attention to history. Then we're being really naive as Native people because history tells us this is going to happen. The other foot is going to drop. The other shoe is going to drop at any time. And so I just, what the work that Colleen does, the work that Chief Seattle Club and all the staff, they do an amazing job, is incredible because it focuses on the most vulnerable, which is like a double thing. It's doubly vulnerable because you're Native plus all those other vulnerabilities. But it's important to note that the average Native person is also similarly vulnerable. It just might not have some of those compounding factors, but as a matter of data, all of us are going to, have that same exposure at some point in our life.
Yeah, I just got to respond to that too and say, it's absolutely true. And one thing I've been trying to say, when I get into these tables where I'm advocating for Native community, is I'm trying to remind people that, I am way more likely to die of COVID than your average white person. It's just true. The data is clear, and that is definitely connected to lack of nutritional value systems that were wiped out by colonialism. It's about the cycles of poverty that we've been forcing, the lack of affordable housing. And so that is why what we're doing at Seattle Club to just push forward affordable housing. We have a brand new traditional foods program right now that I'm just so excited about, to see some of our elders to get some of their traditional foods back into their diet. So we are vulnerable in a special way right now, but also showing incredible resilience.
And I know that, Chief Seattle Club also reminds our community, both in all of the work they do and in the reminder of, the words of Native Americans were never homeless until 1492. So just understanding that this double vulnerability that you mentioned, Gyasi, was created and continues to be created. And it's something that we need to collectively work to dismantle and change. And poetry like Joy Harjo's also really highlights this interconnectedness. There was actually a tweet yesterday that actually was related to Lovecraft Country by Victor Laval, in which he said, but maybe most of all was that they saw that they had to face the fact that they couldn't fix what happened. They could only see true history and take us with them. bearing witness to American atrocity as an act of ancestral love. And I feel like that's one of the things that An American Sunrise and Joy Harjo's body of work does. And speaking of ancestral love, I thought it might be a good point now to read, Gyasi, if you could read For Earth's Grandsons, because that brings so much of the resilience piece full circle in a beautiful way.
Yeah, I love this piece. What do you want me to read? Like what segment?
Jeff has got us here, and you are going to read.
Hey Jeff, nice to see you too. So the whole thing?
Yes, if you would.
Oh, okay, all right, yeah. For Earth's Grandsons, stand tall no matter your height, how dark your skin, your spirit is all colors within. You are made of the finest woven light, from the iridescent love that formed your mothers, fathers, your grandparents, all the way back on the spiral road. There is no end to this love. It has formed your bodies, feeds your bright spirits, and no matter what happens in these times of breaking, no matter dictators, the heartless and liars, no matter, you are born of those who kept ceremonial embers burning in their hands, all through the miles of relentless exile, those who sang the path through massacre, all the way to sunrise, you will make it through.
I picked this one because I love this one so much. My husband has started this tradition of memorizing poetry, memorizing a poem to think on, and this is mine. I don't quite have it memorized yet, but I just love this poem, and I again, back to Gyasi Seattle Club. That's what I'm thinking about all the time. Is some of our elders and and it's not just in Gyasi Seattle Club, all around Indian country. Some of our elders have been holding on to those ceremonial embers and holding on and waiting for the next generation to emerge, waiting to see home expressed in new and powerful and traditional ways. And so this poem just means the world to me, and a reminder of how communities have gone through incredibly hard times before, and how we are making it through in today's time and time frame right now.
Yeah, I'm also curious about what this poem evokes for you, Gyasi, and also just to hear for your perspective of someone who is also a poet and singer, like Harjo.
Oh, I'm not a singer. I'm tone deaf, but I do make music. I'm a product of the hip hop generation. And by the way, and I want to be clear, and this isn't false modesty, Misha or Colleen or anybody else, but I wouldn't ever put myself in the same sentence as Joy Harjo. She's amazing, and she's been amazing. That's the cool thing, is that she's finally getting the recognition she should have had 30 years ago. But so this poem right here, for me, as I get older, because the frames change, right? Your reality changes, your lenses change. And as somebody now who my centering in life is not, law, is not even tradition or even religion or anything like that. My centering is my family and my children and my lady, my significant other, and my mom, who I'm blessed still to have on this earth. And that's my centering. That's what means everything to me. And what I see is a hopefulness. And I think sometimes Native people, our resilience is celebrated too much. And because that's like, okay, well, you have to go through hard times in order to get to that. I like to just, celebrate. Yeah, that's an amazing trait that we can get there. But let's skip some of those hard times. Let's try that. Let's get to a place of celebrating, which I think she does beautifully in here, outside of the resilience, is celebrating just love and celebrating that's what's actually going to get us through. The last line, you'll get through. It's because of love. It's because of all, yeah, definitely, because you're tough, you have this genetic material, you have this history that made you resilient, made you tough, made you be able to withstand stuff. But outside of that, it's that love, it's that familial peace that keeps you centered. And now, like as I get older, and looking at being at some point, hopefully being an old man, being a grandfather, being all those things. Like, no, I want love to be the center. I don't even want it to be resistance. I don't even want it to be rebellion. I don't want it to be anger. I don't want it to even be resilience. I want it to be based upon love, and that's going to be, children, your superpower moving forward, because you have this safety net that's not going to let you down. And that's what's going to get you through. And I thought it was beautiful that she gave, it's a love poem. At some point, it's just a beautiful love poem. And I love love poems, and maybe I'm getting old and sappy, but I think it's beautiful.
Oh man, that's so why I love you, Gyasi. Like, I totally agree. Like, one of the lines is like, there's no end to this love.
Yes.
And I think about, my parents, my siblings, my family, my kids, my husband, my grandparents. Like, there is just this connection of love and family that has brought us through all of it. And so I love everything you just said, and really, like, it resonates super super deeply.
I feel like you've really, both of you, highlighted so much of what An American Sunrise does throughout the work itself, is that she's balancing the pain of history with the power of love, and how much pain has clouded the ability to find that center and to keep coming back to that. But also just how those embers that the ancestors have carried have tried to keep love central, even when other things have tried to tear that down.
Yeah.
So one of the things I wanted to both mention to the audience is that, please, we're ready for some questions if you have questions, but we could talk about Harjo all day. But I'm curious about how do we create a sense of centering of love for people who are struggling? How do both of you in your work try to connect people who are vulnerable, who are moving through these hard times?
Oh man, I can, the work we're doing at the Chief Saddle Club right now is just so poignant and so connected to that theme of love. So the Chief Saddle Club, we've been open every single day since the COVID crisis started. We opened our doors in a new way in a way that we haven't done before. So we've been feeding the vast majority of folks who are experiencing homelessness in Pioneer Square. And, that's been kind of tough for us, because as people we didn't know, and we're feeding, I think last count was almost 10,000 meals last month that we were doing right in Pioneer Square. So, and we usually serve around 75 to 100 folks a day, but we're just like multiplying that because the need is so great. And I was standing outside about a couple months ago, and we had this huge line of people behind us. And I was talking to one of our elders, and he said, "Colleen, I'm really proud of what we're doing here at Chief Saddle Club." And I said, "Oh, great," because I was feeling like he might have been concerned because we're not being able to do the programs the way that we usually do them. And he said, "No, I'm really proud." And he's like, and he pointed at the crowd of people, and he said, "This is what the Native community does: is we feed the folks that are not being fed. We love them when they can be hard to love. We give them everything that we have in moments of crisis like this." And that continues to resonate with me, and is a theme of our work right now. Is we have this heart of love, and an expression of love through our food. Every time someone's like putting that delicious piece of whatever they're eating that day into their mouth, we hope that they understand that it's because we love them, and we care about them, and we believe in them, and we have hope for their future. So the theme of food at Chief Seattle Club and Love has just been connected, since we started 50 years ago.
For me, first of all, I do want to, specifically, we've been unabashedly gushing about Chief Seattle Club, and I think we should. That's one of the things that for Native people, and I do think I don't like to blame, colonization for a whole lot, because it happened to everybody. But I think one of the things that happened is we did lose faith in our institutions, and we lost faith in ourselves. And we don't, and a manifestation of that, Misha, is that, it's been taken as a cultural trait that Native people are inherently very modest and stuff like that. And I'm suspicious of, anytime we say any ethnic group or cultural group is inherently anything, like, yeah, I don't know. I know such and such, but then I think about it, and I think there's actually evidence that we aren't inherently modest. How do I think that? Well, we have something in Blackfeet culture called chicken dancing. And chicken dancing is predicated upon, it's getting, it's a dance that's intended to get attention on yourself. It's supposed to. It's a mating dance. Like, I'm trying to attract the attention of this individual because I want to interact and maybe procreate with that person. And it's a very, very powerful dance. Well, that's not modest at all. And so for my point with that is that we lost the ability to brag about our own. And I love bragging about Chief Seattle Club. I love bragging about our institutions that are working really, really hard to protect us and to not only try to fix some of the damage, because again, I think that resilience gets a little bit too much play, but instead also tries to build us up so that we're proactively prepared to go out into the world and do amazing stuff and be as powerful as we want to be. And I think that's something that Chief Seattle Club does incredibly well. And so, I just want to, echo the sentiments of Colleen that Chief Seattle Club shows love every single day to a large group of people. And not all of them are Native. There's people from all over the city that come there and are in need. And they say, come as you are. We're going to love you. So going back to that first poem, and because a lot of the background noise is the Christian ethic, but it's kind of the Christian ethic because it's very judgmental. Colleen and Chief Seattle Club and organizations like that do it, the Christian ethic, better than a lot of churches where they say, actually, no, come as you are. We're going to accept you. We're going to love you. We're going to feed you. We're going to put you in a position that you can actually address those things and stop being one of the most vulnerable. We're not going to judge you and say, hey, you're drinking, so you can't come in here. You smell like weed, so you can't come in here. I can't feed you. That's not come as you are. So, I love seeing that. And that's one of the reasons why, as Colleen said, I've been such an avid supporter and hopefully somebody who actually gives of myself to be part of that, because I fully believe in that mission. I fully believe in that, everybody needs to be loved, even if they don't see themselves as worthy of love. And maybe even especially when they don't see themselves as worthy of love, they go in there and they get those services and it's love manifest with food and stuff like that. So I just think that's beautiful.
That's all gorgeous. And I mean, that is also what the library, its core mission also is to come as you are. This is a space that is open and welcoming to you. And it's so hard not to be able to serve people in the way that we're used to, but it is the way in which our work is aligned. I just wanted to comment on something you said, Gyasi, about the humbleness. Earlier you said, oh, I couldn't be put in the same sentence as Joy Harjo, but I think you can. And I really think if she were here today, she would say the exact same thing. Because Advice for Countries, that poem, is about the ways in which our larger culture, dominant culture, makes people feel small. And I think she would say, you are out there doing work, writing and sharing with your wisdom and your wit and speaking truth to power in a way that is exactly what her work is trying to do. So one of my questions for both of you also is...
Thank you, Misha. Let me acknowledge that. Thank you very much.
We're so full of love, Misha.
Well, I mean, I think that this is a celebration of both the work you're both doing as organizations and individuals is what we're here to do. And that is what poetry also centers to. It's just seeing those small moments and not walking by, letting them wash over you, and actually really seeing the work that is done in those small moments and the big things too. I wanted to ask, what does it mean to both of you to have Joy Harjo to be the U.S. Poet Laureate in this moment?
I was so overwhelmed, overjoyed, thrilled. Representation matters so much. Gyasi and I both have children, right? And I remember as a kid, like the representation in my educational experience was like almost zero. I've had my own child say to me, like, "Oh, one of my fellow students said to me, "Oh, I thought Native people were like the dinosaurs." This has happened a few years ago, and so we're often thought of as sort of something that happened a long time ago. And the modern experience of Native people and representation of Native people is just so crucial. So I'm thrilled to see Joy out there as U.S. Poet Laureate. It means everything. It means that my kids are having representation of what they can be as they explore the arts, as they explore music and writing and other kinds of expression of art. So I'm thrilled, was brought to tears by this acknowledgement that a Native woman as U.S. Poet Laureate.
My response is twofold. Number one, so as Colleen said, same generation. And somebody I always try to acknowledge and tell about how amazing she was. Elaine Miles on Northern Exposure. Yeah. Like that was the first time I saw, and she's from the Pacific Northwest. She lives up here, Umatilla and Nez Perce, Nimipu. And she's incredible. She's brilliant, and hopefully she's getting work, but she's a trailblazer, because before that, we really didn't see us at all in any mainstream. And then immediately after that, if you do the chronology, there was Dances with Wolves immediately after that. Then there was Thunderheart, and then there was some stuff. But still, it was rare, and it's still rare. Obviously, it's still an uncommon occurrence. And so having Joy as the Poet Laureate was a really, really big deal. It was. I mean, it's huge. Then the other side kicks in. I'm an underground hip hop head, and I also like to keep the stuff that I love close, and I don't generally like when it gets mass exposure, because like, no, that's ours. She's been brilliant for a really long time, and she doesn't need that affirmation from the United States or from white people or from anybody to say and to translate, how important she is to us and how important she is to me, and how important she is to Colleen. We already knew about that. You guys are the ones that are late. You guys are the ones that are lacking, like so many other times in history. It's crazy you're just now getting to this. And so, there's a part of me that is, doesn't necessarily like the fact that so many organizations, obviously United States government, so many white liberals, like they can say, oh, well, like we're progressive or we're woke because we're checking out this, this Native lady. No, there's a whole bunch of dope Native writers. And it's important to understand that without that affirmation, they're just as dope, just as brilliant. So Joy is amazing, incredible, but she's been amazing. She's been incredible. And like, it's good. I'm glad. I hope she's getting, a ton of money from speaking engagements and stuff like that. I hope in that regard it's benefited her. But, I would like to see, more of like just more. It's never enough, because as bad as she is, there's other people that they could have been poet laureate too, or they could be an amazing screenwriter, or they could be whatever it is, but they just didn't get those opportunities. I'm glad she got that opportunity, but there's others, and we have to consider that it doesn't make her brilliant. She was already brilliant.
Gyasi, you've hit it all. It is a shame that it took from 1937 to now to feature an Indigenous poet as U.S. Poet Laureate. And, it speaks volumes to what we're talking about here today.
Yeah.
And I do want to just mention also that our Seattle Reads author this year is another brilliant Indigenous writer, Tommy Orange, with his debut novel, They're There. And you can still join us for some of his engagements. He's going to be speaking online this Saturday at 7:00. So register and check that out as well. And of course, you have the opportunity next week to meet with Joy Harjo through Chief Seattle Club. We have a couple of questions from the audience. One that to some degree was echoed before. Alicia has asked, what is the most important thing for outsiders to know about the Native American experience? And also, how can we support Chief Seattle Club volunteering monetarily? And how can someone who is non-Native support?
Gyasi, why don't you go for the first one? What is the
What's that?
You want to answer the first one? What's the most important thing for outsiders to know about the Native American experience?
And I mean this, I'm not trying to be snarky, but there is no Native American experience. Like there's millions of Native American experiences. We're all individuals. We all, I understand the question. I understand it's coming from a good place and it has good intention, but there is none. I'm an attorney. I just came from court right now. That is something is that the Native American experience? I'm Native. That's an experience of mine, but that's not reflective of what everybody else is doing, and what everybody else is doing isn't reflective of my experience. I am, as you can see, maybe from my hair, I'm also mixed with African American. I have a urban accent. All of these things are very individualized, and so the beauty of connecting with Native people is like the beauty of connecting with anybody is learning that individuality, is learning that the Puyallup tribe is an amazing, beautiful community and is a lot different than the Muckleshoot tribe, which is just right up the street, which is completely different than the Suquamish tribe and the Duwamish tribe and the Tulalip tribe, which is completely different from the Blackfeet tribe where I'm from, and the Pawnee Nation where Colleen is from. Like, it's just so different. And that's the beauty of it, is those differences. That's where you get this rich texture that has different food types and different languages and different dances and stuff like that. And so the Native American experience is going and actually learning the nuance, and learning the beauty of the few common things that we have. One of the few common things we have is that experience of colonization, is that experience of the relationship with the government that has been incredibly oppressive and incredibly antagonistic toward us. But that doesn't mean we're the same people. That means that we have some similarities. And so I would say that in a very, hopefully a way that is not snarky, that is not sarcastic, but there really is no Native American experience. There's a whole bunch of Native American experiences, and the texture of that tapestry, that's what makes it so rich, is that there's so many different ones.
Yeah, I think that's such a brilliant answer. And I know that one way I want to answer it is that we do have a Native American experience because, like you said, Gyasi, of colonization, where a lot of our traditional housing methodologies were just taken away from us. And so part of our work now at Chief Seattle Club is to build housing that responds to the cultural needs of Native community. So we are working as hard as we can to address the high rates of homelessness in the Native community, to find ways to support our relatives and bring them into beautiful housing that we're building right now. And we're building one project in Pioneer Square. The other one is out in Lake City. In 2022, we will have added over 200 units of affordable or low-income housing for Native community. And we're really proud of that because we do think that the Native experience should be that we all have appropriate housing, that we all have ways to take care of our families and to love our elders and to love our children in housing that is for Native communities. So we're excited about that. And I also just wanted to answer the question about how to support the Chief Seattle Club. Of course, we accept donations through our website, but also we really want you to share with everyone that you know about the need in Native community around housing, around the need of supporting our folks who are homeless, to understand their brilliance, understand how we're showing our love and support of them at the Chief Seattle Club. So sharing on social media is super, super important and exciting. Sharing about the work that we're doing in our new projects. We had a really exciting development on Indigenous Peoples Day where Pearl Jam was our first donation to Coast Salish welcome figure or welcome pole in front of our new building at Pioneer Square. And so we're doing all kinds of exciting things around that to elevate Native community, to elevate Native art and design so that we can truly be a city that lives up to our name, the Chief Seattle, or Seattle, and be a very Native and Indigenous city. We think that is one of the best ways that you can support the work that we're doing here at the Chief Seattle.
Thank you both. We have another audience question. Elizabeth says, I'm teaching Native American literature in winter. Who is one author I must have my students read?
I think right now, Tommy Orange.
I was going to say the same thing. Brilliant.
Yeah. At this moment, Tom, he's speaking about an experience that is very specific, but as a matter of data, most Native people live off of reservations, and there's not a lot of, including my, I think that there's been a what's the word? I think sometimes, we fall into things that, as writers and storytellers, things that are easily palatable. And so what's that? Archetypes, that's the word. And so, I don't think there's been enough writing on Native people in cities. And in urban environments, because people conceptualize, riding horses and John Redcorn, the wind in the hair and stuff like that. And the truth is, again, as a matter of data, and Tommy Orange captures that. His book is about a Native in Oakland. And how many times has that been written about? Probably none. And it's really, really resonant. It resonates, I think.
Well, I was going to add Louise Erdrich. I'm not sure if I'm saying her last name right. Is that right, Gyasi?
Yeah, Erdrich.
Louise Erdrich. I just read her book, Love Medicine, and she's a beautiful novelist. She tells the story of reservation Indians mostly, but reservation Native people, but also weaves in the urban Native experience as well. I think she's just an incredibly beautiful author, and I love a good novel. I love to get kind of engrossed in something that's not outside of myself and outside of what I'm doing. So I highly recommend her. And again, when I read Tommy Orange, I was just like blown away. Like the urban experience that he describes, I just can relate to so much. So again, I think he'll be the Saturday with Seattle Public Library as well, featured author, and we'll be speaking with you, Misha?
No, with my colleague Stesha Brandon, who is the director of our Seattle Reads program. So do check that out. It's going to be a wonderful discussion. I wanted to add a few authors. I just this week read Whereas by Layli Long Soldier, another poet, just incredible work. Stephen Graham Jones, who is a Blackfeet horror writer, incredible writer. Rebecca Roanhorse, who's actually reading tonight with Powell's, with Tochi Onyebuchi. And then a local author whose book just came out, Bury My Heart at Chuck E. Cheese's, Tiffany Midge. So we've got, I think, Washington State. Yeah.
I did not know that. Yeah, she's hilarious.
So, I mean, exactly. There's so many hilarious, brilliant writers out there that don't get the shine they deserve. So definitely seek them out. And also the library is happy to make lists for you of other authors to check out, other Native authors.
Yeah, there's a lot. And, you know, with I mean, look, we're the best storytellers in the world. We've just needed the platform. And you know, I'm glad to hear of these, you know, all these authors. Rebecca Roanhorse, she's Native and Black, and you know, futurism, where we're going, amazing. There's a bunch. There's a whole bunch. It's, as Colleen said, there was a dearth of materials when we were young. It's not because they weren't brilliant. No, those guys were amazing, but it was just that they didn't have the access. Now, yeah, I love it. There's so many options and there's so many things to keep my kids occupied.
Someone has shouted out your book, How to Say I Love You in Indian by Gyasi Ross. Teresa Marie Malo has also been called out. Dennis E. Staples is someone who I met when he was a Clarion West student, also just wrote his debut. Totally incredible. Anything by Vine Deloria, keep them coming. This is great. You know, I think that this is exactly what Joy Harjo her work is trying to create and invoke, is just the, you know, widening that field and more Native voices being uplifted. That is central to her work in general and her mission as a poet laureate. So, do we have any other questions from the audience that you would love to see Gyasi and Colleen discuss? Oh, someone has asked me to put some things in the chat. I will do that. I guess maybe a way to bring us into a close here as we're entering into our last minutes together is, what is the role of art and poetry to bring people together and also help us in these tumultuous times?
Yeah, I mean, it's an important question. I know that there are many of us who have, you know, watched more TV than we thought we might do, or read more books. I've read more novels than I have in many years because of COVID, right? And so I think that the role of art for me and at the Chi Seattle Club right now is inspiration. It's keeping us connected to who we are as humans and as Native people. I know early on in the crisis, our art program at Chi Seattle Club created little art kits to hand out, not only with our food, but also to hand out art, to hand out, say, hey, this is a way to deal with the kind of mental hardship that we're all going through COVID. So it's been really incredible at the Chi Seattle Club. For the longest running program we have is our art program. And we constantly see people coming through, feeling connected, feeling like they have a place where folks are going to take care of them and love them, and they can express that through art. So it's just a beautiful time to express art and also to read and watch, and all kinds of ways to look at art right now in this world.
For me, art, the first art I was exposed to, my grandpa, he wrote books. He wrote a book called The Sun Came Down. It was about Blackfeet creation stories. It was a real big book. It was on Harper and Row, now Harper and Collins. And that was a big deal. He wasn't an educated guy. He dropped out of school in, sixth grade, but he had amazing stories because we're the best storytellers in the world. And he used to do his stories like he did it all in it's like comic book almost, like, you know, where all the paintings, he did it on a buffalo hide. and he did all the painting and the stories, and it talked about the relationship, the way one story related to another. And it was really cool. And I later found out that those didn't only include stories, they included prophecy. And when I was really studying story, and there's this guy named Martin Delaney who wrote what's considered the first work of Black science fiction. It was a book called Blake or the Huts of America. He wrote it in around 1851. And it was during, it was, obviously before the Emancipation Proclamation, for Civil War, et cetera, et cetera. And what it was the reason why it was considered Black science fiction or Afrofuturism was because he wrote about something that was extremely controversial about that time. He wrote about a free colony of Black people. Oh my God, that's science fiction. That's futurism. And so I think that it's our job to listen to artists, to watch artists, because like my grandpa, like Martin Delaney, like Patrice Cullors, who wrote, When They Call You a Terrorist, and that was Afrofuturism, and started an organization called Black Lives Matter. That was something that was in the future. I think that there's a prophetic value to art where you can fearlessly say that something's going to happen. And it puts an idea in somebody's mind. Oh, I guess that is possible. And maybe we can help make that come to fruition. So I can write a story about, a car that doesn't depend on fossil fuels, or runs on hydrogen, or whatever it is. And maybe not in this lifetime, maybe in this lifetime, but maybe, lifetimes down the road, somebody will see that and it'll come to fruition, and hopefully it will better life. And I think that's, one of the most important qualities of art, is to be able to have that prophetic value. To be able to say, where we're going, whether it's good or bad. I mean, right now, somebody writes some real nasty post-apocalyptic stuff, and I'm sure that's coming out. But, I think that that's one of the qualities, the most important qualities of art.
Beautiful.
That's just a beautiful way to bring us all home here. I think that Joy Harjo brings us prophetic vision, and in a way, that is the American sunrise that she sees, and that she sees for everyone, and that she is trying to convey. Any last thoughts before we close today?
Thank you, Misha. Thank you, Colleen. Thank you, Chief Seattle Club, all you folks down there. Thank you for having this conversation. That's it.
I'll mention briefly, we had a question that we won't probably have time to field, of wanting to find Native American books for children. I will mention that one person out there to really pay attention to is Debbie Reese, who's doing really excellent work on telling you which books actually are positive and more three-dimensional portrayals. And I'll also mention that the library makes personalized reading lists for readers of all ages. You can use our Your Next 5 Books resource, and we can make a personalized list for you by librarians, not algorithms. And we're always happy to help you find things to read. Please support Chief Seattle Club. Colleen, I think you might want to say more about the Always Indigenous series. And thanks again for inviting me to join you in this celebration of Joy Harjo's work.
Misha, thank you so much. It's so great to be with you. This conversation flew by. We're just so grateful for the partnership with Seattle Public Libraries. It's just been wonderful. We will be back with the Joy Harjo Book Club on the 28th. Misha and I with Marcy Solman from KUOW. So we're grateful for the Seattle Public Libraries' support of Chief Seattle Club, and also for our homeless community who's out there. The Seattle Public Libraries are a safe place, and we're looking forward to getting them all reopened someday when we're back from this pandemic. I do want to mention that we have our Always Indigenous program coming up next week at the Chief Seattle Club. On Monday, we have a conversation with Superman. Christian Parrish takes a gun, who's an old friend of mine. We'll look forward to that conversation on Monday, along with some of his videos. He is a performance artist and powwow dancer and incredible guy. Tuesday, we'll have a day in the life at the Chief Seattle Club with some of our staff and video of what happens at the Chief Seattle Club on a day-to-day basis. On Wednesday is the big day with Joy Harjo in conversation with Tracy Rector. Tracy is an incredible friend of the Chief Seattle Club and also arts influencer here and storyteller here in Seattle and filmmaker. She is incredible. So we're excited to have her in conversation with Joy Harjo. That's next Wednesday at 12:30, October 21st. Thursday, we'll talk about our Indigenous food systems and a new program at Chief Seattle Club called Food Sovereignty Farm. So we're excited about the Sovereignty Farm work that we'll be doing with our members and share that with you. And then on Friday, we'll be celebrating 50 years of Chief Seattle Club, our history and tributes, some special awards that we'll be giving to some wonderful people on Friday, October 23rd. So again, we thank you so much for being with us. As I close, I just want to acknowledge the work of our tribal communities in this area whose land we are now standing on in Seattle, the Muckleshoot, the Duwamish, the Suquamish tribes. We are so grateful for you. I saw a quick question pop in from Cecile at Duwamish. We're grateful and support and love the work that you all are doing at Duwamish Longhouse. I invite you all to check out their website. Again, thank you all for your tremendous support of the Chief Seattle Club. I want to finish with just the final words from the poem we read earlier, Advice for Countries Advanced, Developing, and Following. The final stanza that says, we are making our grandchildren's world with our words. We perceive a world in which everyone sits at a table together with enough for everyone. So thank you all. Look forward to seeing you next week. And this has been wonderful to be with you. Thank you, Jeff Bearhan from Sky Bear Media and Olivia at the Chief Seattle Club for making this happen. Take care, everyone.